Hi, welcome to SacTV.com's Riverside Chat here at the American River for Halloween 2024. I'm Alex Cosper. My two guests today are Dr. Nancy Skullivan and Pete Pumpkinbrain. They are very much into Halloween because they'd love it if Halloween were every day of the year, because then they could come out from their hiding places and fit into the norm of society. But neither one of these characters fits into the normal mainstream. They're both extremists for who they are. Dr. Nancy Skullivan is a Democrat, and Pete Pumpkinbrain is a Republican. And so they have an interest in this year's election, which, quite frankly, I think has been the worst election I've ever seen as far as campaign ads and as far as message. It's just a garbage election between personalities. And so they understand that, and they're here to make fun of that. And they're also here to make fun of surface level politics, which is all you get from mainstream media, which I like to call big dumb media, because it's there to make you dumber. It's there to reduce your choices, narrow down your choices to Coke or Pepsi or Ford or GM or whatever. They just want you to choose between the biggest choices, like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. They don't want you to choose among independent parties. Big media is never there behind independent candidates, which is why they don't get much coverage, which is why they never get elected, except maybe at a local level. It's possible to campaign and get 5,000 votes somewhere, and that's enough to win an election somewhere, like a small office somewhere in a small town. And from there you can just pivot to bigger offices the more media coverage you get, because media coverage is the big thing that elevates politicians to their positions. And just like Sting said in his song "Da-do-do-do-da-da-da-da" for the Police, poets, priests, and politicians have words to thank for their positions. So words in the form of rhetoric, in other words, telling people what they want to hear, which is surface level politics. And big dumb media, it will never go deep into politics, at least not deep enough to tell you what's really going on with any of these issues. They just want you to vote Democrat or Republican, and I often vote Democrat even though I'm an independent, but I'm never happy with any of the choices, and so I'm able to laugh at all of them. Most people can't laugh at the ones they support because they act like it's a religion. They put all their emotion behind it, and then they learn maybe at some point that they were just bamboozled by political rhetoric. Because both parties are working to do the same thing for the same team called Wall Street. And Wall Street works for the military-industrial complex and the global banking system. So those things, any type of war, requires funding, which you got to go through Wall Street entities to get that funding, or the government can act like Wall Street and issue bonds, and that's how they can build up a money supply to pay for all this military overspending. And then that runs up the national debt. But that debt, big dumb media will make you think that debt is to China. And for a long time they fooled a lot of Republicans about that. But I think even Republicans know by now that's not true, that the U.S. debt is mainly to Wall Street, to itself, but to Wall Street firms and entities, big investors like Warren Buffett and, bigger than that. Big banks, big investment firms. That's who's running the USA. That's who's funding both parties and coming up with the same results no matter who wins. However, there are some exceptions, like I think Trump's idea was Trump's idea to start the trade war with China. That didn't really work out too well because it pumped up all other prices. We used to get cheap materials from China. Of course, they had cheap labor because it's slave-driven. But he wanted to bring jobs back to America, as in slave jobs, back to manufacturing plants that pollute the environment. And I actually think it was better to have the pollution going on somewhere else, and even using cheap labor to get affordable products out of China. I would like to see the changes to where it's a fair system for everyone, but you're not going to get the whole world on board on the same, economic system, other than supporting the U.S. dollar or the U.S. petrodollar or whatever comes next, crypto, or whatever's supposed to be the global currency is what the U.S. is all about. For a long time, Russia was an ally of the United States during World War II. Russia actually defeated Hitler without the help of the U.S., although the U.S. served as backup. But it was the Red Army that took Berlin in 1945, and the U.S. still takes credit for that. Soon afterward, or even maybe before that, the relationship with Russia was falling apart with the United States because they didn't want to join the Bretton Woods oil system or the money system, the U.S. dollar system that was bonding all these Western countries at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. But simply speaking, it unified the U.S. with other Western countries to support the U.S. dollar backed by gold, at least till 1971, when Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard, and then the Bretton Woods thing was over with. And then it became the petrodollar. So the relationship was then U.S. and Saudi Arabia creating the petrodollar system, in which countries buy, oil with U.S. dollars. So anyway, that's, a Halloween story in itself. And we've been victims of that ever since 1973 or 4, whenever the petrodollar was formed under Nixon. Nixon, the guy who tried to super outlaw cannabis, move it to Schedule 1 when it's just a light medicine, is what it's now considered legally in a lot of states. And it always was a medicine until it was made illegal in 1937 for false reasons. There had been a movie called Reefer Madness that made it look like if you smoked marijuana, you'd jump out of windows as if you took LSD, and that scared a lot of people. So it's usually some kind of scare, like a media scare through big dumb media or the cinema system or whatever, that causes people to be worried about things they shouldn't even worry about. Like Y2K wasn't that big of a deal, but the media tried to scare everybody. And even in late November, after all the techies had said we got it handled, the government even said they had it handled, there wasn't going to be a big meltdown when the clock struck midnight at January 1st, 2000. Yet NBC still ran a scare movie about Y2K in November of 1999. So the media never runs out of scare tactics, because that's part of what moves markets, see? They can sell survival kits and all kinds of solutions to the scares they create. Like they did with COVID. I mean, let's face it. Dr. Nancy here, she can tell you firsthand, working with hospitals, how the hospital system was already strained with a shortage of nurses. And so that was part of why healthcare costs were so high, just the shortage of help. And so it causes everyone to stress out and work overtime, the limited staff they have. And so then COVID hits in late 2019, early 2020. And it's funny because in the past, the NIH, the National Institute of Health website, which is the government's medical website for the public, has said that vitamin C can fight any type of virus. It's buried on there. But see, that was in the early 2000s, in that first decade that article appeared. And then at that time, Pfizer, the big vaccine maker, they got in big trouble for fraud, and they had to settle a huge settlement with the government for $2 billion because they defrauded the market with products, and they also put out dangerous products. And they're a greedy company that rushes products to market. So yeah, they had to pay a $2 billion penalty for their fraud. And that's on record that they're a felony fraud corporation. And then Trump in 2020 hands them a $2 billion contract because he's friends with the pharma companies and he's dumb about medicine and health and nutrition. And that's why, he has poor posture, which is unhealthy. And, yeah, he's living a long time. He's getting up there, but he's also seems mentally demented. And that can come from physical disabilities that are not corrected over time. So in other words, like if you're always hunched over, that can affect how messages travel up and down your spine to your brain, and it can affect your mental health. And I'm not just making this up. So anyway, Trump and Biden are both dummies about health. They both fell for big pharma, particularly felon Pfizer, which turns out to be the top advertiser on mainstream TV, especially on sports shows, ESPN shows, news programming. Pfizer is just all over there with their big sponsor freaking logo everywhere on mainstream TV. And they're just a heavily marketed corporation, and their stock price went way up during COVID. States were mandating, states that were, on the side of big pharma, the greedy big pharma. Even California, which in the past has cracked down on pharma fraud, but I guess Gavin Newsom didn't know better, even though he was seen at sports games without a mask on. So he mandated the mask thing, and I don't dislike him. Like a lot of liberal clowns have abandoned him, but I'm a true liberal who still thinks he's one of the best governors in the United States, especially since he's cracking down on the big 5 oil giants who have defrauded the public, not just Californians, but Americans. They knew about climate change. They knew they were damaging the environment for years and years and years, and then they tried to cover it up with lies, and then they tried to come up with recycling programs that were bogus, and so they just defrauded the state billions of dollars, and now Newsom is suing them and wants them to pay. So that's a cool Halloween story. There's some stories that are cool for the public, but they usually don't get covered by big, dumb media, which is on the side of big corporations, big, dumb corporations that love to rip people off. And that's what COVID-19 was. It was about mass marketing a vaccine. And keep in mind, vaccines normally take 10 years to test to find out if they're effective and safe. That's the key word, safe. They didn't bother. They just rushed it to market. They forgot that in the big influenza pandemic of 100 years earlier, that virus just went away on its own. And that's how that thing, it resolved without a medicine, and that was within a few years. But they still wanted to mass market this product, and it was good for the stock for Pfizer because the stock skyrocketed. But then almost to the day Biden announced that the pandemic was over, the stock started declining. So that's how a president can actually affect stock prices. And I'm sure that's not what he wanted, because he gave out a lot of misinformation about both Trump and Biden gave misinformation about COVID and the vaccine. which was not that effective. That's why you had to take extra boosters and all that other garbage. And it's still, people were still getting COVID anyway. Even Biden got COVID again, and Trump got COVID again. So that's what this election kind of should be about, talking about how knowledgeable is our government about health. We know that WHO, the World Health Organization, is heavily funded by Bill Gates. Bill Gates was born rich and connected. His mom knew the head of IBM. They were both on the board of United Way. And so Bill Gates now gets to hog the media. He spends a lot of money on PR. That means public relations. That means he's paying media groups to get his name out there in the media, to paint a good image of him. Okay, he's one of the biggest funders of media as far as from the private world. And so he gets what he wants from the media, and they wanted to make him the pandemic hero. But really, he should be a Halloween character, you know, scarier than these two characters. Anyway, that's enough for now. Happy Halloween, which is supposed to be a celebration of evil, I guess. It goes way back to the pagan days, so it's not that religious, so don't worry about that, don't worry if you think you're in trouble with God or the devil, because those are just hallucinations. And media is also there. Big dumb media is there to see who it can fool to buy a bunch of products. That's what its religion is, selling products and promoting them. But being a big part of being a market mover, that's what big media is there for, to move markets. And they do it through tension. You know, like elections, like Democrat versus Republican. And even though they're both funding the war machine, and that's the main agenda of both parties, working for Wall Street and the military-industrial complex, they want you to think it's a civil war between those two parties and that they hate each other. When here we have a couple, a beautiful couple, a Democrat and a Republican, who love each other because they're beyond surface level politics. And so should everyone else be. We should all think for ourselves and research the issues ourselves and be vocal about what we think would be better ideas for society, and not be so bogged down by these political labels and definitions that separate us. That's enough for now. This is Alex Cosper for another SacTV.com Riverside chat. Let's meet again here at the American River.